The Wild Robot on the Island by Peter Brown is a picture book adaptation of The Wild Robot, the internationally best-selling middle-grade novel. The Wild Robot was also made into a hit movie. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and welcome to the Kids Bookshelf. Ahead, I'll talk with Peter Brown. He's the author and illustrator of many best-selling children's books, including The Wild Robot Trilogy, Children Make Terrible Pets, and The Curious Garden. He's the recipient of a Caldecott Honor for Creepy Carrots, and he joins us to talk about his picture book, The Wild Robot on the Island. Peter, welcome to the Kids Bookshelf.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, there's whole Roz the Wild Robot universe now. You've got the middle grade books, you've got the hit movie, and now a picture book. But let's go back to the beginning. Tell us about the inspiration for Roz.
Well, Roz all started as a little sketch in my sketchbook. I'm an author and an illustrator. I went to art school and studied illustration, so I spent a lot of time kind of playing in my sketchbook, you might say, just sketching, just whatever pops into my imagination. And one day, I sketched a drawing of a robot in a tree, and it was the kind of thing that art students and illustrators sketch all the time, and your sketchbooks are just filled with these drawings, and a lot of them don't go anywhere. But for some reason, this drawing of a robot in a tree just fascinated me. The idea of a robot in a tree, but more than that, in the wilderness. How would a robot get there? What would a robot do alone in the wilderness? These types of questions just really captured my imagination. And so I was working on a bunch of picture books for younger readers, and my schedule was pretty busy with that. But, the book projects came and went, and every time I finished a project, I thought to myself, maybe I should work on this robot story. And then eventually, after about 5 years of that, I finally was like, I can't stop thinking about this. I better really devote some time and energy to it. And so that's where it all started. And it's fun. The creative process is pretty exciting. It doesn't always work that smoothly. The fact that I had this sketch that turned into a story, that turned into a bunch of stories, that turned into a movie, it usually doesn't work quite that well. But in this case, I got lucky.
Well, and now you're able to draw upon your experience of doing picture books for other authors as an illustrator, and now you've turned the Roz the Wild Robot story into a picture book. So tell us a bit about why you wanted to put it in this form.
The Wild Robot novel, there are illustrations kind of sprinkled throughout the novel, but it's really that storytelling is mostly done with words. And as an illustrator, I thought it would be not only a fun creative challenge for me, but I thought my readers would enjoy seeing Roz become the wild robot in pictures, in a fully illustrated, big, detailed, colorful illustrations. That sounded like a fun project for me creatively. I know my readers often ask me why the illustrations in the novels are not in color, which is pretty standard for illustrated novels. I get that question a lot. And so I started to realize, my readers, they want to see Roz in full color. They want to see her up close and personal. And so this picture book gave me an opportunity to provide that for them.
Would you read a portion, a few pages from the book to give us a taste of what this picture book is like?
Yeah, sure. So Roz, in this picture book, all the dialogue is in speech bubbles. So I'm going to read a few pages, and some of those words will be Roz speaking and thinking to herself, but it won't be like Roz said this or Roz said that, because that's not in the book. So I'll read it as it is in the book, and I think hopefully you'll understand, you can follow. So the story starts like this. In the middle of the ocean, an island stood above the waves. It had meadows and forests and rivers and a great variety of animals. Everything was just right on the island. And then a strange new creature arrived. During a storm at sea, a crate had fallen off a passing ship and washed ashore. Packed inside that crate was a shiny new robot. Her name was Roz. Reader, you might think Roz was out of place on the island. And yet, as the robot explored her surroundings, she had a very different thought in her mind. This must be where I belong. And that was from a speech bubble. And so that's how the story gets started. Roz just like in the novel, she lands on this island, kind of washes onto the shore, and eventually pries herself out of this crate and starts exploring. And she thinks this is where she belongs because she's sort of being born in that moment. She's waking up for the very first time. This is all she knows. And so she goes about the island thinking that it's her home. And yeah, and from there she has a whole adventure. It's a bit of a slightly quieter adventure than the one in the novel and in the movie. Um, like I said, I wanted this to be kind of a gentle origin story of Roz, where I'm including the really essential parts of her story, and maybe skipping over some of the more scarier, tense moments. Because this is for younger readers. I mean, this is a picture book, and so I have to be careful. The novel doesn't get too scary, don't get me wrong, but there's definitely a lot of action and adventure in the novel, and this is sort of a gentle story, watching this character kind of become her true self as we turn each page.
So this is, as I understand, sort of a condensed version of that first novel. Tell us about the story that people are going to find in this picture book.
Yeah, so this is sort of an adaptation of the novel into a picture book form. Picture books are much shorter than novels. There's far fewer words. So it's not the full story. There's a lot of scenes in the novel that are not in the picture book, but there are some moments in the picture book that aren't in the novel also. I wanted to kind of walk this line of giving them something familiar, showing them scenes that they might remember from the novel, but now in full color and big detailed illustrations, but also provide them some new details that they didn't get in the novels. Um, so that was a sort of tricky game I was playing, but I really like how it turned out because it's showing the evolution of Roz from a very kind of typical robotic, what you would expect when you think of a robot. And we see step by step through these pictures her evolving into this wild robot who moves more like the animals. She studies the animals. We see that in the pictures. We see her studying them. We see her mimicking them. We see her learning to speak with them, getting to know them. One in particular, Brightbill, a little gosling, who is one of the stars of the books and the movie. He's a part of this story as well, but it's not the full story. It ends at a place where Roz and Brightbill. How do I put this? The novel things kind of go off the rails at the end of the novel. Roz's mysterious past really comes back to kind of haunt her at the end of the novel. I didn't include much of that or any of that in the picture book because it was like this was more about Roz and Brightbill, Roz and the island, not Roz and her mysterious past. And so I think this picture book will be a great way for younger readers to be introduced to the world of the Wild Robot. And I think that fans of the novels will really get to see Roz in a whole new way in these much more detailed visual storytelling approach that I took.
So it sounds like this picture book will actually have a wider age appeal than the standard picture book, which is usually geared just for those, like 48-year-olds.
That's my hope. Yeah. I mean, the novels were really fascinating to me because when I started writing The Wild Robot, I thought it would be for 8 to 12-year-olds. That's kind of what my publisher said this age range was. And what happened was we found a lot of kids younger than 8 were reading it. A lot of kids older than 12 were reading it. And so I sort of stumbled into this story that appealed to a much broader age range than what I had thought I was creating. And so I wanted to continue that with a picture book. I wanted to make a book that could appeal to younger kids, of course, and hopefully those older readers who are familiar with the novels will find something really to enjoy in this illustrated version of Roz's origin story.
I'm talking with Peter Brown about The Wild Robot on the Island, and our conversation will continue. If you're enjoying this discussion, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. And thank you. And I like the themes that this book explores, and that's one of them, sort of becoming her true self and learning who she is and what she really cares about. It's about adapting to new situations. Friendship plays a big part in this.
Yeah.
And of course, the Brightbill relationship. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so when I was working on the novel, I was doing a lot of research. It's so funny. You write books for kids, and a lot of people just assume these are just casual little projects. You just sort of you had to spend a nice weekend and you wrote a novel for kids. No, I spent years working on this book, and a lot of that time was spent doing research. And so it was really important to me that the characters, the animal characters, and Roz, the robot, uh, feel believable in as believable as possible. And so in the novel, I decided I wanted Roz to have a family because I thought that would help readers care about her. I was looking for ways to have readers be able to relate to a robot stranded on an island. It's sort of a tough premise to relate to, but I thought there's got to be a way. And I thought if she could have a family, that might be interesting. And how is that going to work? And so I started thinking about the different animals she would come across. And, geese have these instincts for imprinting, where if you're there when they hatch, they will follow you anywhere and really latch onto you as their caretaker. And so Roz is there when this little gosling Brightbill hatches, and he latches onto her just as he would a human or a goose. And so what starts off is just sort of imprinting becomes a much more mother-son relationship as Roz basically adopts this little gosling and names him Brightbill. And he follows her around and she takes care of him, and she learns how to speak with the animals so they can have conversations and really understand each other and develop a loving relationship in their own way. And geese have these other instincts, of course, which is to fly south for winter. And I thought that was really interesting too, because Roz realizes that she has to let her son follow his natural instincts. And that means they have to say goodbye. And so when fall rolls around, Brightbill feels his instincts calling him southward, and Roz and he part ways and he flies south with all the other geese on the island. And so that's really the main source of tension actually in the picture book is their separation. Brightbill flies south for winter with all the other geese. Roz has no choice but to stay on the island. She's stranded there. And so the winter comes and goes, and they're wondering if they're going to see each other again, if Roz is thinking about him a lot and wondering how he's doing and what's going on. And if he's thinking about her, and has a lot of thoughts that I think a lot of parents have when they're separated from their kids. And so once again, I was trying to find ways of making the story relatable to readers, and the readers are not all children. A lot of adults read these books to their students or to their children. And so I love that I could insert little details here and there for the younger readers, as well as some details that will really be relatable to older readers as well, including parents and educators.
Yeah, and that was another theme that was in there about growth and moving on, and that was a really sweet part of the story. And I liked kind of the lyricism to it and kind of the symmetry to it, that you started out as you read to us about all things being right on the island, and at the end it's right again.
Yeah.
So that was sweet. I like that she befriended the animals, and in her time of need, the animals helped her out. Mm-hmm. So there is that friendship and friends helping friends sort of theme in there too.
Yeah, community. The idea of community is a big part of all of these books: the picture book, the novels, the movie. The idea that we can't get by all by ourselves. We need each other to survive and to flourish. And so that's a big theme throughout all the books, and certainly part of the picture book. There's a scene towards the end of the picture book where winter has come, and it's a cold, brutal winter, and Roz, in her own way, hibernates, and she builds this shelter for herself, models it kind of after a beaver's lodge, and she sort of hibernates. But when the winter gets really rough, she invites the animals into her home, where she has like a little campfire, and it's warm and cozy, because she has learned this lesson that she needs them, and they need her. They all need each other. They all work and survive and live better if they can find a way to live in harmony and help each other out with a sense of community. In the novel, I get into it in more detail. It's a little more complicated than that, right? Because some of these animals are predators and some of them are prey animals. And so putting them together in one space is a little tricky, but they come to an agreement. They form a truce in the novel and decide that, in Roz's home, everybody is safe. We're us predators. We're going to keep ourselves in check while we're here. Out in the wilderness, we have to do what we have to do. But in here, everybody is safe, and And so they find their own little way of getting along. I don't get into so much detail in the picture book, but I do show all these animals together in that space, sharing that space in Roz's home together.
Well, there's much more of Roz's story that can still be told. So, will we see more picture books with Roz in the future?
That's a good question. I'm thinking about it. I think it could be really fun to make basically a picture book version of each of the novels. We'll see, though. I actually have a lot more stories I want to tell, completely different stories, maybe some more Wild Robot novels. I've got a lot of stories I want to get out of my system. So I'll have to see what seems like the best use of my time, because, it's a tough decision. It's a good problem to have all these stories I want to tell, and the decision of which one comes next can be tricky, but I feel very fortunate that there's so much love for the series. I think it makes me feel like I have a lot of freedom to explore these characters even more. So I think I'll probably spend probably the next Wild Robot book will be a novel and not a picture book.
I want to come back to the movie because I'm curious about kind of what that felt like and meant to you, because here was your creation coming to life on the big screen. What was that like for you?
Well, it was amazing, but it was also strange. To be honest with you, it was quite strange because this whole world has lived in my imagination, and I have presented it to the world the way that I thought it should look and sound, with my words and my pictures. And then I have to hand this off to this team of people who are going to do their own thing. I mean, that they don't make books, they make movies, and they're really good at it. And I was a little nervous, to be honest with you, watching my sort of baby here, handing it over to these folks who I didn't really know and didn't know what their plans were exactly. But I love animation. In fact, one of the reasons I went to art school back in the day was because I wanted to work in animation. I ended up shifting gears towards children's books. But when DreamWorks approached me and wanted to turn this book into a movie, I couldn't say no. I was too excited. I loved animation so much. I loved the story so much. I just thought, well, let's just see what happens. And thankfully, they hired Chris Sanders, who's one of the best animation directors out there. And so I knew it was in good hands. And they made a really beautiful movie. It's pretty spectacular. Visually, it's stunning. The story is really heartwarming. The characters are really lovable. Yeah. I didn't have a whole lot to do with the movie. I was never in the studio working on it, but I did have a lot of virtual calls with Chris Sanders, the director, and Jeff Herman, the producer, over the 4 years it took them to make that movie. We talked countless times. They would ask me lots of questions about my research and my thinking, and really trying to understand the story as much as they possibly could. And so I tried to be helpful as best I could in that way, but I was never in the studio working on the movie. And so I really had to just kind of trust these folks. And, like I said, what they created was a really special animated movie, and I'm really, really proud of it. There's some changes between the book and the movie, as there always are. And some of those changes make perfect sense to me, and some of them I like a little bit less, but I knew what I was getting myself into. And what mattered most to me was that they focus on the biggest, most important themes and characters and details from the book. And they did. The theme of community, of family, of adaptation, and survival. These are all, that's the heart and soul of the film. And so, all things considered, I feel really lucky, because a lot of great books are turned into bad movies. And so I was a little nervous that might be what happened here, but that is not what happened here at all. So I feel pretty lucky.
The picture book is The Wild Robot on the Island by Peter Brown. Peter, thank you for talking with me today.
Thanks, Dan. This has been fun.
If you would like to purchase The Wild Robot on the Island, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. Well, thank you for watching this edition of the Kids Bookshelf. I'm Dan Skinner. Until next time, keep sharing the gift of reading.